Welcome to the Vibrant Life Show. This show is all about exploring the purposes God has placed in our lives and the passion He's placed in our hearts to reach the communities He has placed us in for such a time as this. Whether we're hearing stories of those living out their purposes, helping you discover your gifts and passions, asking hard questions, or leaning into cultural moments, the goal of this show is to remind us that the life we are created to live and is an adventurous one, an authentic one, an abundant one. We are invited to live the vibrant life. This show is brought to you by Second Mile Realty. If you're in Arizona and you're looking for a new home, call Gentry at Second Mile Realty at 480-540-9061. Well, hey everyone. My name is Allie and I am your host here on the Vibrant Life Show. Today we are talking about how we need to move from this scarcity mindset to the mindset of abundance. Because God has so much for us in our lives in the way that He's created us and called us, but a lot of times we end up believing that maybe what we have to give and what we have to offer isn't that much. And so sometimes we might hold on to it, or other times we might not even try to use it because we might not think that it really matters. But I want you to know today that you matter. God has created you with this call that matters. And you matter in this community because God has created you on purpose and for a purpose. And I think that we, as this culture, a lot of times we live in this scarcity mindset that maybe we don't have enough, or maybe maybe that we're not enough. That we don't have so much to give, or maybe even in this world, because of the things that we see, and it might be on social media. A lot of times we can start to see, hey, I don't have this life, or that life looks way better than the life that I'm living. Or maybe it's just our neighbor or our friend who got the promotion, or who got the family life, or maybe is married. I mean, as a single person, sometimes those things can totally cross your mind, where you think for some reason you don't have enough, that you're not enough, because you're comparing yourself to other people's lives. But when I look at the person of Jesus, and I look at the stories of Jesus, and I look at this vibrant life that Jesus says that we, with Him, have a life that is abundant. So we don't need to be living in scarcity. We don't have to be living and thinking that what we have to offer really isn't that much. I'm here to tell you that it is a lot when you put it in the right hands. And today I would love to dive in just for a moment into one of the greatest miracles of all time. And when I think of miracle, I don't know about you, I am a sports fan. I love sports, okay? And in Arizona right now, I know that this could be really bad timing, but depending on when the show comes out. But the Suns, I mean, come on, Suns in 5, okay? So I understand that might not age well, but I want to say go Suns. I am a Packer fan. I love sports. However, when I think of miracles, I think of the moment in the 1980 Olympics. And I want to also add in that I was not born then, okay? So I feel like I need to add that in. I'm an 88 girl. But in the 1980 Olympics, in the Winter Olympics, there's this moment that is one of the greatest sports history moments of all time, but it's in hockey. And the U.S. was against the USSR, and they were in the medal round. So the U.S. was made up a bunch of ragtag amateurs, and I think maybe only one or two had even minor league experience going onto the Olympic team. And then you have the USSR they have won 5 out of 6 gold medals, okay, for hockey over the last times. They were the best of the best around the entire world, and they get matched up. They're undefeated. The U.S. is undefeated. They get matched up in the first round of the medal round. And if you're not a sports fan, I promise there's a point. Just hang with me here. Okay, so hockey has 3 periods. In the first period, they were tied 2-2. Then the Soviets went up 3-2. And then the U.S. came back and they went up. They tied it 3-3 and then went up 4-3 at the end of the third period. And there's 10 seconds counting down. 10, 9, 8. And the crowd is going insane. And the U.S. is about to have the greatest upset really in hockey history. And all of a sudden, Al Michaels comes over the microphone and says, "Do you believe in miracles?" Yes. And in that moment, it was a history marker. Do you believe in miracles? Yes. This ragtag group of U.S. hockey players just beat out the ones that no one thought could ever get beat out, especially by a bunch of amateurs. But what they did was they didn't think that, they couldn't do it. They didn't think that what they had wasn't enough. No, they did, and they used what they had. And they put it all on the line, and it proved to be one of abundance. And actually, Sports Illustrated named that moment the top sports moment in the 20th century. That's what can happen when we just decide to use the gifts and the talents and the time that God has gifted us with in our lives. He can take a moment and he can make it something that maybe no one else would have expected. And honestly, maybe more than what you would have expected. And it be one of abundance. But my question is, do you believe in miracles? So the feeding of the 5,000 with Jesus, as we find in Matthew 14, but also in Mark and Luke and John, this is the only miracle story that's actually in every single gospel. And I find that very significant. Anytime there's such repetition, we need to lean into this because there's a point that God is getting through to us if we believe that this scripture is God-breathed, which I do firmly because it continually is proven true over and over and over again. So what I want to do right now is read to you what Jesus says to his disciples. And the feeding of the 5,000, Jesus is coming in and there are people sitting around. There are 5,000 men and plus women and children. And Jesus is teaching to them. And it's in Matthew 14, 13 through, let's go with 21. But I'm going to start in 15, and I've already set up the story. And it says, when evening came, the disciples approached him, that's Jesus, and said, "This place is deserted. It's already late. Send the crowds away so that they can go into the villages and buy food for themselves." "They don't need to go away," Jesus told them. "You give them something to eat." "But we only have 5 loaves and 2 fish here," they said to him. He says, "Bring them here to me." Then he commanded the crowds to sit down on the grass. He took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he blessed them. He broke the loaves and gave them to his disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds. Everyone ate and was satisfied. They picked up 12 baskets full of leftover pieces. Now those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. So can you just imagine this? Because there are people that are all over the hillside and it's getting late. The disciples are honestly probably just tired and hungry. And they're just saying, "Jesus, it's time to send everyone away." And Jesus is like, no, you do something about this. And they say, "What?" And actually in one of the other gospels, Jesus says, "Well, what do you have?" And they are looking around like, "We don't have anything." And there's this in the other gospel, it says that this boy brings his lunch and it's 5 loaves and 2 fish. And honestly, let's be real here. If I was a disciple and a kid brought me a 5 loaves and 2 fish, I'd be like, "Sorry, kid. That's not going to do much for anyone around here." But they said yes to it. And I think that maybe the biggest miracle here is that the kid shared his lunch. So let's be honest. Have you ever been around kids that, they're pretty stingy with their food? Actually, I'm stingy with my food. Don't come for my fries. You know what I mean? Those fries are mine. They're mine. And so much we can do. We can often be like that, where this is mine. This is what I have. At least I'll be fed. At least I'll have food for the evening, or maybe I can share it with just my family. But no, this child offers it to the disciples, and the disciples give it to Jesus. And they say this phrase that stood out to me and convicted me. It says, but we only. But we only have. How often in your life are you telling people, are you telling yourself, or maybe God, but I only have this much to give, God. I only have this. I was only born in this family, Lord. I only am good at doing things on the computer. What do you really want me to do with your kingdom? And trust me, if you're good at things on the computer, you're good at putting spreadsheets together, contact me, because those are not my gifts, okay? They're not my gifts. See, what we tend to do is when Jesus asks what we have, we say, but we only. We discount. We believe that we don't have enough for God to do a miracle through our lives. But what Jesus says is, okay, well, what do you have? Then bring it to me. So he says, identify your life's resources. What do you have in your life? And then bring them to the source of life. One, identify your life's resources and then bring them to the source of life. If we want this abundant life, if we want the life that is abundant, we've got to bring the things that we have back to the one who brings life, the source of life, who is Jesus. And I believe that we can break these down into three things that I would love to talk about today. Is the first thing is our time. So when we try to identify our resources, our time is huge. Because we live in a world where we have microwaves, we have fast cars, we have airplanes, we have all these things that can get us to all of our places quickly. We have everything that's supposed to help us maximize our time. But in reality, we've been filling our time with more things. It's actually gone a little opposite. Now our lives, the normal thing when people ask how you're doing or what you've been up to, it's just, it's just been so busy. It's been so busy. It's like this badge of honor almost that our lives are so, that we never stop. And I understand that. Trust me, I get the busy life. What I like to say is my life is full. But to be busy, God is asking for our time. And oftentimes when we just don't think that we have it, we don't have time to serve other people. We don't have time to have conversations with the stranger that we ran into at Starbucks. We don't have the time to make that phone call or send that text because we've got too many things to do. But I'm here to tell you, when we offer our time to God and we do those things in obedience, guess what? He pours out in abundance. He gives those things back to us, whether it's time or whether it's in a different way. I had this moment one time that I called my Holy Wednesday. I had so many things to do that day, and I had to leave town the next day, and I just didn't see how I was going to be able to get out of there. And what I decided to do was, God, just give me manna for the moment, manna for the moment, manna for today, and let me just do it with joy. Let me walk this out with joy, even though I have so much. I'm going to give this day to you. Not only did I have the most productive day, I also was able to spend time with people. I did it with joy and I did it with peace. He used that time to replenish my soul. And it was because I offered the time that I did have to the one who could multiply my time. See, in that story, when Jesus took the 5 loaves and 2 fish, he lifted to heaven and he blessed it and he broke it. Now, there's a whole message in the breaking for sure. But in this moment, I just want you to think of it as multiplication. So when we give those times to God, then he can bless it and multiply it. Then he gives it back to us so that we can go out and bless other people. And not only are they satisfied, but then we have things that are left over. Or maybe you're thinking, I'm too young. I'm too old to do this. I had a conversation recently with someone who just said, maybe I missed my call on my life, but at least I can lean into the next generation. And yes, you can do that. You can lean into the next generation, but I want to tell you today that you are not too old to step into the call that God has on your life. You are not too young to step into the call that God has on your life. It's not too late. If you still have breath in your lungs, it is not too late to give what you have to the one who created you. I feel like I was called to ministry when I was in 7th grade. I ran from that for years, and thank the Lord in his goodness and kindness. I came back and I said yes, and he came after me that whole time, and yet he has been able to do without the years that I ran from him, and he made up for those years in abundance in the last 4 or 5 years of my life. And I can only attribute that to him, because when I put that in the hands of the one, my resources in the hand of the source of life, he can do amazing things. Just like Sarah having a baby in her 90s. Okay, let me just remind you of that. And Abraham, as 100 years old, had Isaac. God can do that in your life. Or just how he uses Esther, who was probably 13 or 14, or calling David when he was in his teenage years, but not coming into his anointing until he was 30. Guys, our age, God sees it and he knows it and he's not surprised by it, okay? So why don't we just lean into what God has us here for in the time and in the age that he's given us? So give that over to God. The second thing, as we are doing, and if you're just joining us, my heart for today's show is to remind us that we don't have to live in scarcity, but we can walk in abundance because of the one that we're walking with. We can know that who we are is enough because of who we're living life with. He is enough. And he can use all of these things in our lives to make a difference. So first of all, we give our time to him and we give our talents to him. A couple of episodes ago, I was with Jennifer Smestad and we were talking about how God, she said this line to me that was amazing. She said, thinking of tithing, when we give 10% of the time of our money, God can do more than with 10% of our money than we can do with the other 90%. Now, when we start living that way with the talents he's given us and the treasures he's given us, watch what God can do. A lot of times we start comparing and competing with one another. We start confusing a lot of times the fact that somebody else is walking and it seems like they're getting more anointing or more calling, that it discounts us for some reason. But it could be your story, your capability, what God has called you to do. Here's the thing. When we look at the parable of the talents, as in Matthew 25:14-21, if we just keep our talents to ourselves, God's like, okay, well, if you're not going to do anything, I'll just give it to the one who already has 10. But don't you want God to multiply, to say, here, Jesus, I might only be able to, I'm really great at doing people's hair. Like my mom is a beautician, but she is able to transform really as like almost a counselor in people's lives because she uses the time and the talent she has to bless people around her. So wherever you are, the job that you have, if you actually use it and saying, God, okay, this is what I have to give. This is the talent that I have for you. This is the gifts that you've given me. How can I use it? And how can you multiply it in those moments? Because a lot of times we think things discount us. We're not pretty enough. We're not popular enough. We don't have enough followers. We're not in leadership at our church. We're not in the top role of our business. We're a single parent, whatever that might be. We think discounts us. And actually, I would love it if you would just look at these things as maybe the way that God has allowed it to happen so that you can minister and you can be a light in someone else's life that's going through the same thing you're going through. I was born tongue-tied, okay? I was born tongue-tied. I am dyslexic. And I was scared out of my mind to speak in front of people in public, okay? So you would never, if you looked at those things, you would never guess that I do what I do. Because only God can take a dyslexic, see, I can't even speak, I speak for a living, a dyslexic, tongue-tied, afraid of speaking in public girl and do something with her when I finally said yes, saying, God, I will just do whatever you're asking me to do. And it took one step at a time. I didn't get here in a moment. I started coaching and then I started doing devotions with my girls and then it led to coordinating Bible studies and then teaching Bible studies and then speaking and then preaching and a radio show. Like this, it doesn't happen overnight, but watch what happens when you give back the 5 loaves and 2 fish. Do you believe in miracles? Identify your source and then give it back to the source of life. I shouldn't be here. I almost took my own life multiple times, but really at the age of 23, I shouldn't be here. But God met me in that moment because I just surrendered, put my hands up and said, I'll give you what I have. It's a mess and it's a disaster. And that leads me into the third thing, our treasure. So we give our time to him, we give our talents to him, and we give our treasure to him. And I actually put our story in that category of treasure, because our story, even in the brokenness, even in the pain, or even in the loss, or even in the triumph, all of that is a treasure. It's a gift. Even the people who were born into the same household that you were born into, they don't have the same story as you. They weren't given the same gifts as you. They weren't have the same personality as you, or go through the same losses as you, or friendships, or whatever, because that's your treasure. That's a gift that God has given us. And a lot of times it does, man, there's so much pain in the midst of it. And I want to say that it breaks God's heart that you've had to go through those hard things. It really has broken his heart. But the beautiful thing is that he promises that he can make good things out of anything for those who are called according to his purposes. He can use it for good. And I have watched that in my own life. I don't love using that story of depression and anxiety and abuse, but watch what happens every time I speak on those things and every time I talk about those things and how God has transformed my life because I gave it over to him and he has done something good with it. I take back that ground for Christ. I push light into the darkness. So every time you share your story, because it says that we will overcome the enemy by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. And that is God's work in our lives. It's a treasure. It's a gift to get to do this with God and watch him redeem everything that we have gone through. Everything that you have gone through. And I also believe that our treasure is also our finances. I have watched that in my life as I have said, okay, God, I'm giving you this. I am giving you 10%. I am giving you 10% from the beginning. I'm telling you, I had this car, a yellow Cobalt, and it was a beautiful thing. I just loved her. And I didn't change the oil, so then it died on me. So again, learning things as I go. But I had this car, and I'm telling you, I didn't have to change the tires for quite a few years. And I firmly believe it's because I was putting my money towards God and tithing and doing those things. God took care of me in other ways that I can't even explain. I actually think there's a lot of other stories. A check came in the mail for me on the day that I was crying and saying, God, nobody knows that I need help, and nobody's just going to send the money in the mail, and who really thinks of those things? And I hear those stories all the time, but it never happens to me. I went and go check my mail later that day. I got a check back in the mail from buying my house that I had no idea happened because I was a first-time home buyer, and it was exactly what I needed. Exactly. I am telling you, it is exactly. And I was just crying thinking, how did I doubt you? God proves himself true. When we give that to him and we give our energy to him, coming out of COVID, I think a lot of us have lost the energy to go do things again, the energy to go out into our communities, the energy to go to church, the energy to show up for people, because we had to stop for a little bit. And I think that was good and needed. But I also believe that we have to, I see my life and energy output, not necessarily time constraint. And so I have to decide, God, I'm giving you my energy. And I believe that if I give you this, whatever I have for the day, that you can multiply it in ways that I never could. If I try to do this in my own, I'll be more tired and more exhausted than if I would have just given this over to you. To put those resources in the hands of the source of life, to identify our time. Where do we have time? How are we using our time? Are we discounting ourselves for how old we are, how young we are, or where we are in life? Identify our talents. What are the things that we're good at? What are the things that give us energy? Like when you start doing it and you start serving, all of a sudden you just have this energy lean into those moments, because I believe that God has placed that in your heart for a purpose. What are the things that maybe we think discounts us? As I was sharing my story, I would have discounted me a long time ago. But maybe God can use those setbacks as this beautiful testimony of how he can use anyone. or our treasures, our time, our talent, our treasure, our energy, our story. God is a God of abundance. So do you believe in miracles? Yes. Yes, God can use all of these things. In the hands of Jesus, 5 loaves and 2 fish equals 15,000 plus 12 basketfuls left over for the next day. He is a God of abundance, not one of scarcity. So thank you for joining us today on the Vibrant Life Show. Remember that God has so much more for you, an abundant life, and inviting you to live the vibrant life. Thank you for joining me on the Vibrant Life Show. I would love to connect with you and get to know you. My favorite place to hang out is over on Instagram at allie.gentry or over on Facebook. You can also go to my website, alliegentry.com. That's ALIGENTRY.com. Sign up for my newsletter to stay up to date and get links to the show on all platforms after we air, the show's YouTube channel, and really just all the things. I'm so honored to get to hang out with you today. My heart is that you remember that each day is an invitation to live the vibrant life.